Meanwhile, a member of the far-right group, the Oath Keepers, who plead guilty to his role in the Capitol attack, testified against his former allies yesterday. Graydon Young said he was sorry for his actions on January 6th and claims he thought he was taking part in some type of revolution, like the 1789 storming of the Bastille in France. His testimony comes in the 5th week of the trial against Oath Keepers founder Stewart Rhodes and 4 others. Young, a 57-year-old former Navy reservist, told jurors he listened to what Trump's attorneys were saying about the election and that he was sucked into online conspiracy theories. He now admits he was, quote, acting like a traitor, someone acting against my own government. Joining us now from outside of the federal courthouse in Washington, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. Ryan, good morning. What more did this former Oath Keeper have to say? And is this just a case of him trying to get his sentence reduced, or do you think there's some real contrition here?
It's part of it, but I think, he was pretty emotional when he talked about why he took the guilty plea. And obviously he said that he was trying to, he's hoping that the government would take that into consideration when it came time for his sentencing. His testimony was very beneficial to the prosecution because I think it sort of explained the mindset that a lot of these Oath Keepers had about what was happening on January 6th. Because, what we haven't seen in this trial is a ton of evidence of pre-planning in terms of we're going to enter the U.S. Capitol. But essentially what Graydon Young was explaining was that was sort of the obvious outcome of what they were doing, that they were there because they didn't think that protests were enough, that they were going to work and they were going to do whatever they could. So when the crowd surged and when people went inside the Capitol, he sort of took advantage of that opportunity and joined that stack that was entering into the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. And, we've heard from another Oath Keeper as well, another man from Florida who was talking about how he was ready to die to keep Trump in office. So, and, said goodbye to his family. And the government has presented all of these messages from this other Oath Keeper about how he was ready to say goodbye to his family and was making these preparations in December of 2020. So overall, I think this testimony from Oath Keepers is really important for the government's case because it shows exactly what other members of the Oath Keepers were thinking at this time and what this was sort of all about, Willie.
NBC's Ryan Riley outside the courthouse in Washington. Ryan, thanks so much. Meek, it's interesting to hear the use of the invocation of the storming of the Bastille in France, because we heard from, in this FBI affidavit, the man who allegedly attacked Paul Pelosi, saying, I felt I was like one of the founding fathers, that this was the 1770s, and I was fighting back against tyranny.
There are real direct connections we're seeing in all these incidents. It's impossible not to see them, but some still try. Intelligence officials are warning that violent domestic extremists pose a heightened threat to the midterms. A joint bulletin released by the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the National Counterterrorism Center and the U.S. Capitol Police is also warning that after the midterms, perceptions of election fraud could stir violence. It comes amid threats to candidates running for public office, lawmakers, as well as poll workers. Joining us now, State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Aronberg. Dave, first of all, what's your reaction to this joint warning that we've gotten? Do you also see that the violence could escalate? And how important are very tough charges when it does?
Good morning, Mika. Yeah, the tough charges are important to send the right message. All this stuff is based on 2020 election lies. And so, there are a lot of people who want to both sides this. But misinformation about the 2020 election is really only coming from one side. It is true that we have seen extremist political violence from both sides. You mentioned earlier the shooting of Steve Scalise at a congressional baseball practice. But it's not quite accurate to blame both sides equally for overheated political rhetoric that leads to violence. On the right, it's some party leaders and elected officials who are the conspiracy theorists. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene who accused Nancy Pelosi of having her own private Gestapo police to target Republicans. Now, she said it was a gazpacho police because it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that's who she is. But her supporters got the message. She also said that Nancy Pelosi was guilty of treason and reminded her supporters that the penalty for treason was death. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is about to become a committee chair if the Republicans win the House in the midterm. So she may be a kook, but she's a kook with a lot of influence and potentially a lot of power pretty soon.
I think the mistake to dismiss the kooks was made, for sure. These are sitting members of Congress, and there are more people being elected as we speak who are election deniers and who will promulgate conspiracy theories and say cruel things, which matters in our politics, because it didn't used to be that way. It wasn't that way when Steve Scalise was shot. It was a completely different environment and atmosphere where Democrats and Republicans immediately, without any planning, they immediately came together in one voice and spoke out against it, spoke out against political violence, and prayed together. So I guess my question to you is, do you see this violence escalating, and what are the options in terms of tamping it down?
There needs to be a strong federal law enforcement response. We haven't seen any of the leaders of January 6th charged yet, and maybe that's forthcoming. And I think you may see more violence when, and I think it is coming, Donald Trump is charged over the documents from Mar-a-Lago. This all starts at the top, Mika, and Donald Trump has been openly embracing QAnon themes because he knows that many of his supporters are members of QAnon. He's got a base of QAnon supporters, and so he plays to them. These are people who think that Democrats are pedophiles and that Democrats drink the blood of babies. So why are we surprised when a true believer tries to take out a top Democrat like Speaker Pelosi? It's just like Pizzagate back in 2016 when some deranged individual who was a QAnon supporter fired shots into a pizza restaurant in Washington, D.C. because he believed that Hillary Clinton was trafficking children inside that restaurant. Words have consequences, and conspiracy theories are not harmless.
State Attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Ehrenberg. Dave, thank you very much for being on this morning. And you